Did you know that Metallica's lead singer was raised in an extremely strict religious household and wasn't allowed to take any kind of medicine? Because of a newspaper ad, James Hetfield joined what would become one of the most important rock bands in the world. But along the way, he developed a psychological condition that has been widely studied, the inferiority complex. But how did James manage to become a huge star despite suffering from such a treacherous complex? And how does psychology explain his case? You're watching The Dark Side of the Stars, and today we will explore the dark side of James Hetfield. James Allen Hetfield was born on August 3, 1963, in California. He was the son of Cynthia Bassett and Virgil Lee Hetfield, two devoted followers of Christian Science, a very peculiar religion that preached that God could heal everything. It worked like this: got the flu? Have faith, and God will heal you. If someone in the family broke an arm, they weren't even allowed to wear a cast. James suffered from severe headaches as a child, but wasn't allowed to take any medication. And he couldn't even rely on faith because the religion was forced upon him by his parents. To give you an idea, he had to leave his biology classes at school because he wasn't allowed to learn about the human body, diseases, and all biological aspects of life. During this time, James was isolated from his classmates, who called him weird, pushing him further into isolation. If school was bad, home was even worse. His parents separated in 1976 when he was just 13 years old. His father disappeared, leaving only a note. 3 years later, his mother died of cancer due to her faith in Christian Science. She was diagnosed but chose not to undergo treatment. This left James filled with even more rage. He went to live with his older brother and began finding refuge in music. James started taking piano lessons at 8 years old, but quit 3 years later because he didn't enjoy it much. Since his brothers played in bands, musical instruments were always lying around the house. He eventually picked up a guitar, and the connection was instant. He loved bands like Thin Lizzy, Led Zeppelin, Aerosmith, Motorhead, Black Sabbath, and AC/DC, but he credits bands like Misfits and Ramones for teaching him his signature down-picking technique, which he still uses today. He played in some local bands, but none of them really took off. Then one day, while eating a snack and reading the newspaper, he saw an ad from a drummer looking for bandmates to play music similar to Diamond Head. He picked up the phone and called a guy named Lars Ulrich. When they met to jam, James quickly realized that this odd-smelling kid wasn't the best drummer, but he knew a lot about the local music scene and had the drive that James needed to keep going. And that's how the greatest metal band of all time, Metallica, was born. Beyond just a band, James had finally found something to fill the void he had always felt. He now truly felt part of a family. Unfortunately, this new family was quite dysfunctional. The guys drank excessively, to the point where they became known as alcoholica. The biggest drinker was guitarist Dave Mustaine, who drank so much that he was eventually fired. This made way for Kirk Hammett from the band Exodus to join, completing Metallica's classic lineup with the genius Cliff Burton on bass. From there, they released the classic Kill 'Em All, the incredible Ride the Lightning, and the legendary Master of Puppets, one after the other. The band was on fire. But in 1986, this beautiful journey was abruptly interrupted. During a tour, the band's bus crashed, killing the unforgettable bassist Cliff Burton, who was just 24 years old. He was thrown out of the bus window, and the bus landed on top of him. James witnessed the entire tragedy. This added another layer of rage to his already boiling cauldron of emotions. From then on, he started drinking even more as a way to cope with all the trauma he had accumulated throughout his life. Years later, Metallica released the phenomenal And Justice for All, and then literally conquered the world with the spectacular Black Album, which was not only an incredible success, but also responsible for bringing metal to the mainstream. As expected, with success came unimaginable chaos. James was drinking more than ever, and when drunk, he became aggressive, picking fights with everyone. He resolved conflicts through intimidation and violence. He frequently clashed with Lars and heavily bullied Jason Newsted, who had replaced Cliff. His macho persona was actually hiding deep-seated insecurity. James was extremely introspective, had low self-esteem, and drank to become the person people expected him to be, an angry, impatient, and tough guy. Around this time, James' long-lost father, Virgil, reappeared. Imagine what went through James' mind. The guy who had disappeared without saying goodbye suddenly showed up after James became famous. Despite his anger, James spent some time with his father before Virgil passed away from cancer in 1996. James later said that, at least this time, he got a warning before his father left, and that they grew closer in his final days. Coincidentally, or perhaps by fate, in the same year, Metallica released the controversial Load album, featuring songs like Mama Said and Until It Sleeps, both of which addressed James' struggles with his mother. In the early 2000s, his drinking spiraled out of control. In a 2001 interview with Playboy, when asked who drank the most in the band, everyone pointed at James. The truth was, his behavior had become unbearable. Around this time, Jason left the band, and James checked into rehab. He managed to quit drinking, but his explosive behavior turned into passive aggression, making him just as unbearable. He fought with everyone, especially Lars. This phase is well documented in Some Kind of Monster, which shows the struggles the band faced while making Saint Anger, 2003. Metallica carried on, bringing in the sensational bassist Robert Trujillo. They released 2 more albums and toured extensively, but the conflicts were far from over. In 2019, Metallica canceled part of their tour, announcing that James had checked into rehab again after a relapse. And it didn't stop there. Recently, James Hetfield divorced his wife, Francesca Tomasi, the mother of his 3 children. According to him, she had been his anchor in battling alcoholism and his safe haven when fighting addiction. James also believes he's addicted to fame. He describes the stage as a fantasy world where everyone makes you feel like a god. The problem, he says, is stepping off a stage and realizing you're just a mortal. He always struggled during breaks between tours because he craved that adrenaline rush. A few years ago, he dropped his tough guy act and made a confession during a show in Brazil. In the middle of the concert, he stopped and said, "I have to say, I wasn't feeling great before coming on stage. I felt insecure, like an old guy who can't play anymore. All these thoughts running through my head." His bandmates embraced him, showing the support he needed. Today, James says he is focused on finding a new god, one that isn't alcohol. Metallica remains the biggest metal band in the world. They are millionaires, have won every award imaginable, and are the 5th best-selling band in history. They are living legends. We hope James can overcome his struggles and continue blessing us with his iconic down-picking style. Even though James became a highly successful musician, his life has been a constant battle against alcoholism. His inferiority complex led him to deeply concerning levels of mental health struggles. But how did this disorder begin? And how can we understand it through the lens of psychology? To lead a band as massive as Metallica, James always wanted to maintain a strong personality. However, given all the family conflicts he experienced, keeping up this persona was a major challenge in his life. It's incredibly important to have a home environment where children feel safe to express themselves. James suffered greatly from being unable to turn to anyone when he was a child facing problems at home. Since he had no voice within his family, he developed an inferiority complex that stayed with him throughout his life. The word complex comes from the Latin complexus, which means tied together. Jung explains that we all have psychic energies that revolve around a specific theme within our psyche, and we act based on these complexes. Jung has an iconic quote, "People don't have complexes. Complexes have people." We perceive life through our complexes, so becoming aware of them allows us to break free from the automatic behaviors they create. James developed a psychological disorder, and according to Jung, an inferiority complex is always accompanied by a mask of greatness. Jung states that individuals act this way to create a false balance between opposing forces through their neuroses. This is how James' inferiority complex combined with a superiority complex, ultimately leading him to alcoholism. Why did alcohol become such a major part of his life? To help him feel superior, as a way to cover up the inferiority complex that had always been inside him. James started to lose his sense of purpose and found that life no longer had the same meaning. That's when his journey through rehabilitation began. It's important to mention what Jungian psychology calls the persona. When we create a persona, a mask to present ourselves to society as who we want to be, we also hide what we don't want others to see. And everything we suppress becomes part of our shadow. All of James' struggles were pushed into his shadow. He dealt with them in his own way, trying to translate them into his music and lyrics. But even that wasn't enough. That's why he turned to alcohol as a way to compensate. This is a completely destructive, neurotic mechanism. People who fall into this pattern do so as a form of compensation, without realizing that it will eventually lead them to disaster. James Hetfield likely started to gain more awareness when he understood the role his family played in his life. He reconnected with his father, went through a divorce with his wife, and faced the reality of being separated from his 3 children. All these experiences tell us a story of psychological struggles that can be overcome, but only when the process is fully understood. James has gained that understanding, and his battle continues with great determination. And in the next episode of The Dark Side of the Stars, she is the leader and vocalist of one of the most successful rock bands of the 2000s, but suffered immense childhood trauma due to her parents' divorce. What are the mysteries behind Hayley Williams' traumas? How did she free herself from a guilt that almost destroyed her life? Don't miss the next episode of The Dark Side of the Stars.